We're on air. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good part of the day, folks. Welcome to the largest, fastest growing, and the most active large-scale Scrum meetup. Has started in New York City, has gone global. Today we have a very special guest in attendance. Probably requires no introduction, but I'll do the bare minimum. This is Robert, Uncle Bob Martin, the well-known persona, one of the 17 co-signers of the Agile Manifesto back in 2001. I suspect many people on this call use the word Agile at least once in their resumes, and we probably own this word, and along other things that we know to people like Bob. Bob is the co-founder of the cleancoders.com, and if you work for a large organization, we'll not be dropping any names here, but I've seen at least a few large banks where Clean Coders is the standard out of the box learning opportunity for internal developers, software engineers. So Bob is the author of that. And Bob has been the programmer since 1970s, and his specialty in C++, Java, clean architecture, etc. So he's a very technical and well-versed person. And today he will be entertaining us with a very interesting subject. Bob, once again, thank you for joining. I'll pass the baton over to you, and please take it away.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for inviting me, and hello, everybody. Today, I'm going to spend about an hour talking about professionalism. This is a talk I've given for the last 10 years. It's on YouTube in a million different places and been very popular over the years. Expecting professionalism. By the way, the name Agile, since you brought that up, at the end of the Snowbird meeting where we all gathered, and we had written the manifesto, and we kind of knew why we had come, and then we all went down in the basement and we had this meeting and said, well, what should we call this? And the contestants were things like lightweight. That was mine. I liked that one. Nobody else liked that one. They thought that was terrible. And let's see, Jim Highsmith said he wanted to call it adaptive because he had just written a book called Adaptive. And it was John Kern who said the military is really interested in the word agile right now. And everybody kind of grimaced and thought, well, that's not a great word. But then we had a vote, and agile won by one vote or something like that. And we all kind of shook our heads and said, well, we got to call it something.
But Bob, I don't want to interrupt you, but it's so consistent with other stories that I heard from the first year guys, and also like Craig Larman is the co-founder of Less, has given me exactly the same story. And John Kern is actually going to be speaking to us in a few weeks, so we'll keep you honest with this story, but I bet it's going to be the same version, right?
Oh well, I hope so. Although some of the stories that have come out of that meeting have diverged over the years. So
no, adaptive versus agile. Excellent. Okay.
But I'm pretty sure John will tell you the same story. He might not fess up to being the guy who said agile, although he might. Anyway, expecting professionalism. So I'm going to transport you into a world where I am your new CTO. Let's see if I can get my screen a little bit better here. I am going to be your new CTO. And by the way, this is not a world you want to live in, because I would make a terrible manager. I'm a programmer. I don't want to manage people. I don't like managing people. I'd just rather write code all day. But if I were your new CTO, I would have certain expectations. And I'm going to describe those expectations to you in a moment. And you're going to hear those expectations with two different ears. And I mean, metaphorically speaking. One ear will be the ear of the manager and customer, and my expectations will sound perfectly reasonable to that ear. And then the other ear you will hear will be the ear of the programmer or the IT professional. And to that ear, those expectations I'm going to outline are going to sound completely insane. And I will leave it to you to judge the difference between the two and somehow come up with the bridge. The motivation for this talk is professionalism. And here we get into an interesting topic, because what is our profession? What do we profess? A professional is someone who professes some kind of ethics, standards, and disciplines. What are our standards, ethics, and disciplines? Do we have any? Has anybody ever written them down? Is there any chart somewhere that says, well, we believe in the following things? And the answer to that is, well, no, not in particular. There is no generally accepted profession of software, whether you're a programmer or a QA person or anybody else. We do not profess something standard, and that's a problem. And it's a problem for us because, well, you have to look around the world right now. Just look around your room. Don't go too far out. Just look around the room and count the number of processors running within 20 feet of you. Count the number of processors that are on your body at the moment. Do you have a phone near you? Do you have AirPods? Do you have a watch? How about your car keys? Your car keys have software running in them. Or look at the walls of the room you're in. Is there a thermostat on the wall, or is there a smoke detector up there somewhere? Are there speakers or microphones, or the number of processors running within a small radius of you is probably very large. And if you expand that radius out a little bit, like go to your kitchen, there's a processor in your microwave oven. There's a processor in your dishwasher, in your refrigerator, television set, telephone. Go out to the garage and look in the car. You know how much code is running in a modern car? And I'm not talking about a Tesla, right? I'm just a regular old modern car. It's got 100 million lines of code running in it. And most of that, of course, is in the GPS system and the entertainment system. But some of that code sits between your foot and the brake. Some of that code sits between your foot and the accelerator. There are if statements in there. And wouldn't you like to know what those if statements say as you put your foot on the brake and those if statements execute? Wouldn't you like to know what they say? How many people have been killed because those if statements malfunctioned for one reason or another? And the answer to that is dozens, close to 100. There have been a number of people who have been killed because the software in their car lost its mind, and the car accelerated out of control with non-functioning brakes and smashed into something. Several millions of dollars have been paid out in damages because of that kind of malfunction. You and I are the software professionals that sit at the nexus of what's going on in our civilization at the moment. Nothing happens in our civilization without software being right smack in the middle of it. There's nothing you can do in the Western world without software interposing itself right there. You can't make a telephone call. You can't watch television. You can't cook a hot dog. You can't wash your dishes or your clothes. You can't drive to the store. You can't buy anything. You can't sell anything. No law can be enforced. No law can be passed. No insurance policy can be claimed or instated without software sitting smack in the middle of it. Your grandmother, though she may not know it, is using software almost on a minute-by-minute basis. You and I, software people, sit in the nexus of the entire civilization. This did not used to be true. 30 years ago, this was not true. It's only gradually happened over the last few decades where software is the foundation of our civilization. Our civilization could not currently exist without software running just about everything. You and I rule the world. Other people think they rule the world, and then they hand the rules to us, and we write the rules that execute in the machines that govern everything. And I'm not talking about Skynet here. I'm just saying here we are. We're the ones sitting at the nexus. And we have no profession. There's nothing we profess, especially in terms of ethics and disciplines and standards. There is nothing we profess. Here we are in the middle. Civilization depends on us for its existence, and we have no profession. And I think that's something that we're going to have to deal with pretty soon, because in some relatively nearby future, some poor software person is going to do something dumb. There have been a number of dumb things done over the years. There's there's been some dumb things and some malfeasant things also. Dumb. Let's see. Well, you could look at the 737 Max and say, well, there are some dumb things done there by some of the software people as well as some of the hardware people. But there's a fairly significant software component to the deaths of those 300 people as their airplane smashed into the ground at the speed of sound. So that's a little bit of a software problem. Or then you guys, some of you are in New York. I don't know where the rest of you are, but you've probably heard of Knight Capital, right? Knight Capital, where they lost $450 million in 45 minutes, which is a pretty good rate of loss because some software guys did something dumb in the middle of the night and didn't quite update all the servers they had to update just at the right time. Or we could talk about Volkswagen. You know, there you get into the malfeasant side of things, where there were programmers that actually wrote if statements that could check to see if the car was sitting on an environmental test stand, and if it was, it adjusted the engine parameters so that it would not emit noxious fumes, and then as soon as you were off the test stand, it put the engine back into high emission mode. And they got caught at it. And there's this wonderful moment, wonderful is not quite the right word, but a very interesting moment where the CEO of Volkswagen North America was testifying before the Congress of the United States. And the Congress of the United States asked him the question, right? How could you have let this happen? And he answered it this way. He said, and I quote, "It was just a couple of software developers who did this for whatever reason," unquote. And of course, the last part of that was a lie because it wasn't for whatever reason. But the first part of it was relatively true. It was some software developers who wrote those if statements into the code operating in those Volkswagens that caused them to emit fumes. We are not a profession. We do not profess even enough standards to have prevented that. By the way, those guys went to jail. At least some of them did. So here we are, sitting at the nexus. And one of us, sometime in the near future, is going to do something stupid, hopefully not malfeasant, but something stupid, and kill 10,000 people at a shot. And it's not hard to imagine what that might be now, because there's so much software controlling everything. And when that happens, and you know it will happen, when that happens, the politicians of the world will rise up in righteous indignation, as they should, 10,000 people just having been killed, and they will point their finger right squarely at us. And don't make the mistake of thinking that finger is going to point at your boss or the CEO or the executives, because you heard the CEO of Volkswagen North America put that finger right back down at the developers. And by the way, it belongs there because it's our fingers on the keyboards. We're the ones doing this stuff. And they will ask us the question, how could you have let this happen? And we'd better have a good answer for them. Because if our answer is, my boss told me it had to be done on Tuesday, if that's the answer that we give, then the politicians of the world will hang their heads in disgust, and then they will go off and do the one thing that they do, which they don't often do very well, but they do it anyway. They will pass laws. And those laws will tell us what books we have to read and what languages we have to use and what platforms we have to use and what frameworks we have to use and what processes we have to follow, what signatures we have to get and what courses we have to take. And we will all wind up working for some horrible bureaucracy related to the post office. And I would like to avoid that last outcome. How do we avoid it? We avoid it by answering that question a different way, because the question will get asked. And we should be able to answer that question by saying, this was a terrible accident. but it was not due to our malfeasance. It was not due to our negligence, because here are our standards. Here are the disciplines we follow. Here are the standards and ethics that we profess. This is how we enforce it. This was an accident. It was not due to our negligence. And we couldn't say that right now. So my goal is to start the wheels of professionalism rolling by introducing some basic standards. These are the expectations I've mentioned a little bit earlier. The expectation you are going to hear with 2 ears. And let us begin. I expect, as your new CTO, first expectation, be prepared, both ears open. I expect that we will not ship shit. Now, this is a difficult one because most of us are used to shipping shit. We don't like to admit this, of course, but we are quite used to it because it's the only way we can meet deadlines. It's the only way we can satisfy all the pressures coming in from above. And there's a bunch of people out there listening to me right now. There's 100 of you out there. And you all know that you have shipped shit in the past.
And Bob, we're only listening to you because we're not seeing any slides change. Who's got the slide controller?
Oh, yes. Let's see. The screen sharing was paused. So let's see if I can unpause it. I'm going to go to sharing it again. Share. We haven't had a lot of slide changes so far. That did not seem to work. I'm going to stop the sharing. I'm going to start the sharing again. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Just another piece of lovely software. Okay, now, I believe you can see that.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So you didn't miss too many slides. Here, I'll show them to you again. I'm your new CTO. Professionalism, I expect. We will not ship shit. That's all you lost, so didn't really lose that much. What does it mean to not ship shit? Well, it means that we have certain standards that we uphold. And those standards go well beyond just the mere behavior of the software. The software needs to behave well, of course. It can't crash. It can't miscalculate. It can't make the life of the users miserable, like Zoom just did. But it also has to have something else. It has to be well structured. It has to be properly arranged. The software has to be a good piece of work. It is not uncommon for software developers to ship a piece of software that appears to work well, but internally its structure is a horror scene. That is still shit. That is still something we don't want to deploy. It's not something we want to ship to our customers. And the reason we don't want to is because it degrades any future possibility for that software. Most of us have experienced the exponential increase in the cost of developing software. So if you start out with a greenfield project, some of you have probably had this experience, right? You start out with a greenfield project, you've got a bunch of software developers working, and there's no code. There's nothing, there's no software yet. And then you ask them, develop this feature. Can you do this one feature? And the developers go, yes, we can. And they start to code, and code pours out of every orifice of their body. And within a week or 2 or 3, there's a feature working. And everybody gathers around and goes, oh my God, we've never seen a feature come out that fast. My God, especially if you're doing Scrum or you're doing Agile. My God, they've gotten something done so fast. Why, I bet we're going to take over the world. Can you do it again, guys? Here's another feature. And yes, they all go crazy and write code. Now you come back to that team a year later and you ask them for a feature and they go, man, that's going to be really hard. Ooh, that's going to be tricky. I don't know. It's going to take us months. And you say to them, well, you used to be able to do this kind of thing in a week or two. And the developers look at you with this funny eye and they say, yeah, but you don't know how complicated this code has become, how internally tangled it is. Why, if we touch even a single line of it, all hell could break loose. And they back away in great fear and say, no, it will take us months. If you've been in this business for any length of time, you've had that experience. The experience of going fast at first and then exponentially slowing down, or is it logarithmically slowing down? Whatever, asymptotically approaching zero productivity. That's the kind of thing we would like to avoid. And that is what shipping bad stuff creates. So that's my first expectation. When we ship something, it's going to be something we are proud of both externally and internally. We're going to be able to look ourselves in the mirror. We're going to be able to look our customers in the eye and say, you know what? This was good work, guys. This was good work. We did well. And we can't quite do that right now. Expectation number 2, we will always be ready. Now, what does this mean? What does it mean to always be ready? Well, you guys are doing Scrum, right? You're Scrum people, you're Agile people. Okay, what does it mean to always be ready? And if you read the Scrum books and you read the Agile books, you will notice that software is divided into these fixed time intervals, which some people call sprints and some people call them iterations, and who cares what you call them? They're these nice fixed time increments, which usually are 2 weeks long. I prefer 1 week. Some people like 2 weeks. Other people like 3 or 4 weeks, but I think that's way too long. Too much can go wrong in that period of time. What is supposed to be done at the end of every sprint? What is the state of the software supposed to be at the end of every sprint? And the answer to that is deployable. The software should be deployable at the end of every sprint, not from a business sense. The business may not want to deploy it, but from a technical sense, from the sense of all the developers. If the business said, we're going to deploy this, all the developers should say, fine, go ahead. Yep, tested. It works. It's great. You can't log in. You can log out. You can't log in. But hey, if you want to ship that to your customers, that's a business decision. That's not a technical decision. That's what I mean by always being ready. We are ready when the business is ready. What I never want to do is have the business be ready to deploy and have the technology team going, no, my God, you can't deploy this yet. No, we need to burn it in. We need to make it run with a smoke test for a month. It's not safe. I don't ever want to hear that. You should always be ready at the end of each sprint to deploy if the business says deploy. Now, most of the time, the business is not going to want to deploy because it's not going to have enough features to make sense to deploy, but that is a business decision, not a technical decision. Internally, I expect everything to be done by the end of every sprint, and the software could be safely, if not profitably, deployed. I expect stable productivity. Stable productivity. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's the opposite of that asymptotic curve towards zero that I described before. I expect that when a software team begins, they will work at a certain level of productivity, and every month that goes by, that level of productivity will remain roughly constant. Right? They're going to be working at the same level of productivity a year from now, 2 years from now, because the internal quality of the software has not degraded. The relationships with the customers have not degraded. The internal team structure has not degraded. Everything is constant or improving, but generally speaking, constant. I expect that the team will make sure that the software and the team and the relationships are all maintained so that productivity does not decline over time. This declining of productivity is such a signature of software right now. It's so common that we've gotten used to it. We've gotten used to the idea that we go fast at first and then we slow down. There is no reason that we have to do that, except for the fact that we make messes and don't clean them up. I expect inexpensive adaptability. Inexpensive adaptability. Now, what does that mean? Well, the word software is a compound word. It's composed of two words, soft and ware. Soft meaning flexible and ware meaning product. Software means flexible product. We invented software because we want our products to be flexible. We want the behavior of our machines to be easy to change. That's why we invented software. Had we not wanted the behavior of our machines to be easy to change, we would have stayed with hardware. But no, we invented software so that we could reach into our machines and change their behavior easily. That is what I mean by inexpensive adaptability. The software should always remain easy to change. From an internal coding structure, from an external team structure, from a customer relationship structure, the software should be easy to change. How easy? The cost of a change should be proportional to the scope of that change, as viewed by the customer. So here's the issue, right? Customers will come along and they say, well, we want this change. And the customer understands that that change has a scope. They understand there's the size related to it. For example, if they change absolutely everything the way the software works, they're going to expect that to be a fairly expensive change. Right? But if they only want to change one little thing, just one little thing in there, they don't expect that to cost a lot of money. To the extent that the software developers react in horror to changes and they storm around going, oh my God, that completely thwarts our architecture. Our design can't tolerate it. To the extent that the managers roam around going, our team structure cannot deal with this kind of change. We never anticipated this. To that extent, the team has completely failed in its primary goal to make the software be software. I expect inexpensive adaptability. I expect the customers to be able to come in and say, we want this change. We understand how large it is. We understand the scope of it. And the cost of the change should be proportional to the scope as understood by the customer. I expect continuous improvement. I expect everything to get better all the time. I expect the internal design of the software to get better. I expect the code to get better with time. I expect the relationships inside the team to get better with time. I expect the customer relationships to get better with time. I expect everything to get better with time because that's what human beings do. Human beings make things better with time. Nature is the agent of entropy. Humans are the agents of enthalpy. We make things better with time. We organize and improve. So with every passing month, the software system should be getting better. The software teams should be getting better. The organization should be getting better. I expect continuous, incremental, unending improvement everywhere along the line. I expect us to behave like humans, good humans who improve things with time. I expect fearless competence. Fearless competence. That might need a little bit of explanation. Fearless competence is the opposite of fearful incompetence. Now, let me describe fearful incompetence to you. Imagine that you're a software developer, right? You're staring at your screen. You've got code on that screen. That code was probably written by someone else, or maybe it was written by you a year or so ago. Mute yourselves. Maybe it was written by someone else a year or so ago. And you look at that code on your screen and the blood drains from your face and you stare at it in horror because you realize that it's an utter abomination. And a little angel pops up on your shoulder, your right shoulder, and whispers in your ear and says, you know, you could clean it. But the devil appears on your left shoulder immediately and yells in your ear saying, my God, don't touch it. If you touch it, you'll break it. And if you break it, it will become yours forever. And you back away. You back away from making the change you know is needed, but you are too fearful to make. And you know that if you're doing that, everybody else is doing that too. You may wonder why software systems behave as they do. Why do they degrade with time? Why does software rot? And the answer to that is fearful incompetence. The reason that software rots is because everyone responsible for that software is so afraid to improve it that they allow the rot to continue and accumulate and grow until it overwhelms the system entirely. Have you ever worked on a team where the only recourse was a complete redesign of everything? I mean, half the developers in the world are working on that complete redesign right now, because that's generally what happens inside software teams, right? They work on a system until it becomes so unwieldy and so completely incapable of being changed that they demand a redesign. And do you think the managers want to redesign the system? You think they're happy to hear, oh yeah, we only spent $50 million on this software, and now the developers are telling us it's got to be completely redesigned. I mean, when you approach the problem and say, well, we just got to redesign everything, that is the ultimate admission of complete failure. I mean, we're just going to throw it all away. But we used to have a saying a long ago, and it was, the best thing that could happen to this system is for people to walk into the machine room with a great big magnet. Now, nowadays we don't have machine rooms and nobody understands what the magnet would do anymore. But back in those days, we understood perfectly well what they meant was that somebody should just delete everything so that we can start over. I don't want to see that happening. I don't think big rewrites are a good idea. Massive redesigns are not a good idea. I want the software to be continuously improved. And I want that done through fearless competence. How do we get that? How do we do that? How do we deal with the fact that people are afraid to touch the software? Imagine how wildly irresponsible it is to be so afraid of the thing that you created that you are unwilling to improve it, unwilling to make it better. Think of how incredibly unprofessional that is, if we can talk about profession at all. How can we deal with that problem? I want you to imagine that you're a software developer stuck in this situation. And I want you to imagine you also have a little button, just a little button over there in the corner. And if you push that button, some lights blink in a nice science fiction way and computer noises come out of a speaker for a while. And then a little green light lights up. And that little green light tells you that everything works. The system works as planned. Everything is great. Nothing has been broken. If you had that button, how would you deal with the scenario I just described a little bit earlier? You brought this screen up on your screen. The blood drains from your face. You look back in absolute horror at the abomination in front of you. The little angel pops up on your right shoulder and whispers in your ear, you know, you could clean it. And the devil cannot talk because you have that button. And so you reach into the code, you reach into the system, you make a small change, not a big change, a small change. You push the button and lights blink and sounds come out and a green light lights up and oh my goodness, I haven't broken anything. Well, I wonder if I can make another small change, a little improvement. Push the button. Oh my goodness, it's still working. Well, I think I'll make another small change. Push the button. Ooh, it turned red. Undo that change, push the button. Green. Good. Oh, I see what happened. I did it the wrong way. Push the button. Green. If you had that button, you would not be afraid. If you had that button, you could be fearlessly competent I suggest to you, you get that button. You find a way to get that button. And you spend whatever resources are necessary to get that button, because they're probably going to save you an awful lot of money if you had that button. I expect, because you have that button, I expect extreme quality. Now, some of you out there may have a bug reporting system. Maybe it's Jira, maybe it's one of the other ones out there. You know, we software developers have developed
Bob, you there?